All right, welcome to Chapter 7, and this is Episode 3. Pew, 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 pew. Oh, look out, it's AT-ATs in the background. Oh. I love Star Wars. So, anyway, I'm going to go back to playing Star Wars when I'm done giving this lecture. Let's talk about some of the real deal, the power behind stratification. I mean, who has this power? What do we talk about? What do we mean when we say that? For Plato, every culture considers some type of inequality just. And I think we can see that, right? Again, we try to justify that inequality. Marx, and of course, each of these sort of lines up with one of our theoretical paradigms. Marx, capitalist society keep the wealth and power for just a few. And Spencer, survival of the fittest, at least as three different types of explanations. So what does ideology mean? What are we talking about? Well, ideology really is just all of these cultural beliefs that justify these arrangements that we have, right? Including patterns of inequality. So cultural beliefs, so people of European descent are smarter, they commit criminal acts less often, therefore, when they do get wrapped up in the justice system, we need to find more leniency for those folks and harder sentencing for the other folks because they are more likely to be criminal. Anyway, blah, 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 right? On down the line. So we justify social arrangements. Also, we justify patterns of inequality. Every culture considers, everyone, right, on the globe considers some type of inequality as fair. It doesn't feel like that, I imagine, to the people who are on the lower end of that. But again, think about it, think about your own culture. Think about where you come from. That culture certainly considers some type of inequality fair and then establishes that in patterns over time to reinforce that system. Ideology changes with the society's economy and technology. Look, when we looked at World War II, we knew we were going to need to send folks to war, and we knew that people who weren't working or allowed to be in the job sort of area and contribute to the economy, people identify as the gender female, suddenly we needed their help big time. And so we have to understand that ideology changes. And in some ways, you can never go back. You can still try and pay women less or give them less opportunity. But the reality is, once you have changed that pattern of inequality, people resist the notion of going back to it. And of course, Marx, culture and institutions combine to support a society's elite. Look, we know Marx and his fabulous beard. Sorry, I lost my train of thought thinking about his fabulous beard. He was basically, and we'll talk about this, but the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, and if there's this many workers and they're being taken advantage of by such a small percentage of people that are owners, how can that even last? Well, it keeps lasting and lasting and lasting. And he's going to say, really, culture and institutions, they just want to support the elite, the powerful people. They don't want to support the other people or even lift them up that much, because then they might not feel like they have as much themselves. Now, here are some ideological notions. And of course, a lot of these don't have any sort of factual reason, but they lie still in the power behind stratification because they manifest themselves as real. The rich are smart, right? You obviously have earned your wealth because you're smart. You're rich because you're smart. And poor people, obviously, they're poor because they're lazy, right? And that supports this sort of systematic inequality by defining it as fair. Of course, there are people that are rich that got their wealth from the parents that ran 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 businesses into the ground, declared bankruptcy multiple times, and are just even lazier by far, not just, but even lazier by far than the people that they demonize as being lazy, the poor. But you have to keep putting that out there so that, or at least powerful people do, so that it sticks of some sort, so that when we see how many people are poor, it somehow seems justified. That brings us to this people get what they deserve, right? Ideology that supports our market-based economy. If you're poor, if you're out of work, if you lose your home, I mean, that's what you deserve. And that's a market-based economy. Just because capitalism is our system of economic basis here in this country doesn't mean that it's fair, justified, or even should be, right? Colorblindness. I think colorblindness is the dominant racial ideology, right? I don't see color. And I've heard people say that. And we know that that's not true because 99% of the time we're not talking to somebody who has a disability who actually can't see. That's just how they're expressing that notion. Well, I want to be colorblind. But there's a lot of problems with color blindness. We are not in a post-racial society. We have not moved past that. We do see color. And that operates under the assumption that we are living in that post-racial society where race doesn't matter, but you might not want race to matter, but it does. And the powerful and the people who run these stratification systems, they're really the ones that determined how much race matters or how little race matters in the first place. And they are also oftentimes the very first people to say, why are we even talking about race? You make everything about race. And the reality is, no, you systematically made everything about race. I'm responding to it, right? When in fact it is very much race relations and racism still a very prevalent issue. But we try and hear that. And we also hear, can't you just be like us? We know that's assimilation. We know that assimilation is not assimilate like people who are the minority, but assimilate to what the majority is doing, be like us, right? But that's not always what people want. We want pluralism, and a lot of folks do not want to assimilate. They want to be able to keep the things about their culture that are specific, that make them unique and valued and wonderful, right? All right, so here you go. Structural, functional, and conflict approach, both macro level approaches, and just use this as a great framework for how we're going to apply theory here. And you know, one is based on inequalities. You know, social position reflects the way society divides resources, whereas structural functional is just going to be, we've got a competitive economy and you're out there doing it. And of course, there are some things about that that are very true. How you apply yourself, how you're trying, what you try to achieve, and your actual work that you do. That being said, we know that the system has so much implicit bias built into its very institutions that also doesn't reflect reality for a lot of folks. All right, I like this. We are always split on this. Which job has a greater functional importance to society? Functional importance. You decide, janitor or brain surgeon. It's a toss-up, right? I mean, a lot of schooling can save your life. Imagine 1 week in New York City without garbage removal. Which job has the greater functional importance? So we're not talking about stratified, right? Again, maybe what makes the most money. What's the functional importance? Garbage collector or a teacher. And I remember actually growing up, my parents were like, yeah, the people who work for the garbage place in town make more than we do per year teaching. And we're here every night, we're here on weekends. So we can look at value in many different ways. Which job has a greater functional importance to society? Talk show host, president. Now, since I did this slides initially, we've gotten into territory where we're like reality TV show president, sort of a combination of the two. But which has a greater functional importance? I mean, people really pay attention to Oprah. You believe it. People really pay attention to the president, right? You know, whatever that looks like. So functional importance. Again, you decide. Since we're talking about a functional perspective, let's talk about the Davis-Moore thesis. Inequality is not only inevitable, but necessary for the smooth functioning of a society. That should sound an awful lot to you like a structural functionalist perspective, right? Hey, we've got inequality. It's not only inevitable, but it makes the system run smooth. I mean, not everybody wants to be doing the hard, thankless, very tough jobs. If you're looking at picking your fruit or your food, the cancer rates for that are off the charts. And that is not a formal statistical claim there, but they are. They're 10 times plus what other people are experiencing. So you need inequality to function smoothly. Stratification has beneficial consequences for the operation of society. And furthermore, functionalists would say, and it's found in every society, which it is. So this is kind of weird though, right? It's interesting to me. The greater the functional importance of a position, the more rewards a society attaches to it. I mean, you have to have more talent, you have to have more training, you name it. So I could use this because this is easy, like working at McDonald's or a brain surgeon, right? I mean, who's rewarded more and why? And of course, any society, like I mentioned before, can be egalitarian, but only to the extent that people are willing to let just anybody perform a job. And that's really the misnomer that you hear with things like affirmative action. I mean, you're never going to find somebody getting a job for United who can't fly a plane because they're a minority person. I mean, that's just not going to happen. And as a matter of fact, if we look at affirmative action and what percentage of college entrance is based on race, right, that would be 0.025 of all applicants based strictly on race. That's 0.25%. We really don't and have not for the longest time, as we're starting to talk about reparations and what's right and what's wrong, we have not tried to equal out that positioning. We've not tried to shore that up in ways that have been forceful enough, noticeable enough, and more importantly, not forceful enough necessarily, but that have made the tremendous impact in society that we need to level a playing field. It might never be this equal, but I'm going to tell you what, it does not, I'm assuming, I don't even know if you can see that other hand, it does not need to be this unequal, right? If you've got this, you got it really big, and the people on top and the people down here, we start to give a little bit more, and these people earn because they will work hard, and they get just a little higher. I guarantee you the people on top are going to look down and say, hey, I lost something. But did they? Nope. People in the bottom, middle, got a little more. These people didn't lose anything. They're still very wealthy. And that's what we have to look at. I mean, I don't know that we'll find true equality, but we can find something better than what we're experiencing now. And we don't just need to leave it up to sort of nature or free markets, which are neither free or decide themselves to be able to do that or decide themselves. They're not human beings. Social stratification, again, under functionalist theory, has beneficial consequences. Unequal rewards benefit society as a whole. I mean, how can you give some people the same as these people over here who we value much more? And I get that, right? We can understand that. Positions in society considered crucial must offer, however, enough rewards to draw talented people away from what we consider less important work, right? People work better, they work harder, and they work longer to get these jobs. And especially if you're paying for a college education, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars, that is important to take into account with that when we're factoring it in. True equality would demand that somebody who performed a job poorly was rewarded as much as someone who performs a job well. We don't have true equality. So do you like the idea? Do you not? How do we assess the importance of an occupation? How unequal should the rewards be? Really? And do the rewards reflect the contribution someone makes to society? Just sociological things to get you thinking, to get me thinking. I mean, do the rewards reflect the contribution someone makes? The guy on the left trades stocks. When things went south on purpose 8 or 10 years ago, they lost $27 billion last year. The reward, he continued to make $70 million a year plus bonuses. This guy over here on the right fights for freedom, member of our military, makes $20,000 a year. His bonus is staying alive, and it would take him 3,000 years to earn that $70 million. We say we value our military, we say we value our teachers, but we really, in stratification, need to take close looks at whether we want to change it or not, right? Do the rewards reflect the contribution someone's making? Who contributes more, stockbrokers or artists? And through stratification in our society, or though stratification ensures inequality, again, the question is, and I'm trying to get you to think sociologically, not just think from folks down here in the middle or up here, or we're against the wealthy, not at all, but do things need to be this unequal? Can we make our United States system of stratification more equal? Yes or no? If you think we can, then we have to go about doing that. And it's going to take a while because it took a long time to set this system of inequality up, right? Question, I want to know how many people feel this way. Can we work together to make this system of stratification more equal? Survey says, right? Now, if we look at conflict and stratification, we know that this is much different than functionalism. Inequality is the result of conflict, and differences in resources serve the interests of some and purposely harm others. We don't distribute resources unequally and not know how it impacts people. We very much do. And we know that that helps some and that it harms others. And that inequality is useful only to some people from a conflict perspective. It's not inevitable from a conflict perspective. Conflict perspective is going to say, you set this thing up unequally and therefore, and you support it, so therefore it continues to thrive unequally. But now we're looking at how many elements and institutions in our society can continue to be this unequal across the board with gender, across the board with race, across the board with ability, and still even have this system at all, right? So values and beliefs tend to be ideological. They reflect the interests of the more powerful members in society, and certainly with the conflict perspective, it's not inevitable. Karl Marx would say it's not inevitable, but he'd also say that all of this stratification is rooted in people's relationship to the means of production. Are you the capitalist? Do you own and operate the factories? Or are you the working person who sells their labor for wages? And again, like I said, still rolling over in his grave, wondering why we haven't had a serious, major, impactful, and institutional changing worker-related movement, social movement. He'd say the proletariats have nothing to lose but their chains, and they have a world to win. We know that they're at a serious disadvantage in a position to how much they're making in excuse me, I can't think of the word, but in relationship to those that have, the have-nots. And then we get into that alienation, that anomie thing, the experience of isolation and misery resulting from powerlessness. I mean, workers get poorer and poorer. They have little and less control over what they make. Then they have less and less control over other aspects of their life. And so we can see how we set up a system according to conflict perspective that is so unequal that it's sort of a self-perpetuating, never-ending type of thing, like a snowball rolling downhill. Now, to stop that snowball, it's a very scientific term in thought, and that's momentum, right? You need to stop that with equal or greater momentum than it has picked up to this point. So that's going to be difficult. It's a challenge. So do you believe a Marxist revolution by industrial workers could ever occur in this society, in another society? Why not? And that again gets to social power and access and wealth and all sorts of things that we continue to discuss. All right, stratification and interaction. This is like our last one that lines up with symbolic interaction, and that is just the micro level up close. Like social standing affects everyday people at different social position. Keep their distance from each other, they behave differently, it shapes our lives, and particularly in this system, look, our conspicuous consumption determines a lot of that, right? Buying and using a product with an eye towards the statement that they make. You might not know it, but when you get that certain type of phone that's expensive or that laptop and you flip it up and I see that Apple from my perspective, that's making a statement. I mean, we have conspicuous consumption, right? The way we dress. Right now, ripped jeans is back in again. Like way ripped jeans, like 50 or 60 or 70, makes me sound old, rips in your jeans. And we buy that way new. People in a lot of the rest of the world would be like, why would you do that? And that's, again, just a show of wealth. The food we eat, having access to organics, the clothes we wear, transportation, drugs, or having leisure time or the ability to spend money on drugs and leisure time in the first place. So think about this in relationship to our food project. How does conspicuous consumption shape your life? You are what you buy. We used to say you are what you eat. So how does social stratification affect the way you behave on a daily basis? I mean, we could look at food deserts and say people in poor neighborhoods and cities can go to any number of gas stations where the food is not nutritious and costs 2, 3, 4, 5 times what it would in a grocery store. That's a food desert when you don't have access to an actual grocery store like other people would for a certain distance. That affects your health. That affects what you can do in this life, etc., etc. All right, we've got stratification down with these 3 videos. Be good people and do good things. And let's get a little bit of headbanging. Yeah, oh, I got to take my hair out. Should I take my hair out? I'm going to headbang. Let's do it.